woman sneaks into a man's sleeping area at night, uncovers his feet, and lies down beside him. Sounds scandalous, right? But this biblical scene from Ruth chapter 3 is actually packed with ancient legal customs, social welfare systems, and symbolic gestures that most people completely miss. Today, we're diving deep into Ruth 3, specifically the gleaning laws that protected the vulnerable, the Kinsman Redeemer system that preserved family lines, and those mysterious symbolic actions that sealed ancient legal agreements. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how these ancient customs reveal a sophisticated legal and social system. So let me bring in someone who spent years studying these biblical customs to help us decode what's really happening in this story.
Well, let's start with the foundation, the gleaning laws. According to the page content, gleaning was essentially an ancient social welfare system rooted in Mosaic law. Leviticus 19 D9:10 and Deuteronomy 24 1:9-22 commanded landowners not to harvest the edges of their fields completely.
So this wasn't just charity, it was actually mandated by law?
Exactly. The page content explains this was designed specifically for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. Ruth, being both a widow and a foreigner, would have been exactly who this law was meant to protect.
And that's where Boaz comes in, right? He's not just being nice, he's actually following legal obligations.
Well, he goes beyond the legal requirements. According to the page content, Boaz instructs his workers to allow Ruth to glean among the sheaves and even to leave extra grain for her. He tells her, quote, "I have ordered the young men not to touch you."
That protection aspect is huge. We're talking about a vulnerable foreign widow in an ancient society.
Absolutely. And this sets up the context for what happens in chapter 3. But before we get to the foot uncovering, we need to understand what a kinsman redeemer actually was.
Right, because that's central to the whole story. Break that down for us.
The page content defines a kinsman redeemer using the Hebrew word goel, literally meaning one who redeems. This was a close family relative responsible for protecting the interests, property, or life of family members who couldn't defend themselves.
So it's like a legal guardian system?
More comprehensive than that. According to the page content, the goel had 4 main responsibilities: redeem land, redeem people from slavery, ensure justice for murdered relatives, and preserve family lineage through marriage.
Wait, so when Ruth approaches Boaz, she's essentially making a legal petition?
Exactly. The page content explains that Ruth's gesture serves as a tacit invocation of levirate duty and the right of redemption. She's placing herself in the posture of a petitioner at a judge's feet.
Okay, so now let's get to the part everyone finds confusing, this whole uncovering feet business. What's actually happening there?
This is where the page content really clarifies things. The Jamieson Fawcett Brown Bible commentary explains that Ruth lay crosswise at Boaz's feet, a position where Eastern servants frequently slept in the same chamber with their master.
So this wasn't unusual or scandalous?
Not at all. The page content notes that if servants wanted covering, custom allowed them to benefit from part of the covering on their master's bed. Since people slept in the same clothes they wore during the day, there was no impropriety.
But there's more symbolism here than just practical sleeping arrangements, right?
Absolutely. The page content identifies 3 symbolic meanings. First, by uncovering, Ruth wordlessly asks Boaz to recover her with his garment, which parallels how in Ezekiel 16:8, God spreads his covering over Israel in covenant marriage.
So she's essentially asking him to marry her?
More specifically, she's asking him to fulfill his kinsman redeemer duties. The page content also notes that lying at the feet signals humility and submission. Ruth comes as a servant, not a seductress.
And the page content emphasizes that nothing indecent occurs, right?
Exactly. Boaz praises Ruth's kindness, calls her noble, and immediately safeguards her reputation before dawn. The page content notes that manuscript evidence across multiple ancient sources shows no variant implying impropriety.
Now, there's this detail about Boaz sending Ruth away with 6 measures of barley. That seems significant too.
Oh, this is fascinating. The page content explains that in Hebrew culture, the groom gave a tangible pledge to the bride's family, demonstrating ability and intent to provide. Boaz's barley parallels Abraham's servant giving costly gifts to Rebekah's household.
So this is essentially a bride price gift?
Exactly. And the page content notes something really interesting about the number 6 specifically. 6 suggests work yet unfinished. Rest comes on the 7th day. Boaz will secure their rest the next morning, completing what the 6 cannot.
That's such a clever detail. And it directly addresses Naomi's earlier complaint, right?
Yes. The page content points out that Naomi had lamented, "The Lord has brought me back empty." 6 measures directly reverse that emptiness. Covenant kindness now fills her home.
So the barley serves multiple purposes: provision, protection, promise, and public honor to Naomi.
Exactly. The page content explains it was immediate food until redemption was finalized, public alignment that warded off gossip, and a nonverbal pledge that his words would be matched with deeds.
Now let's talk about how this all gets legally finalized, the sandal exchange at the city gate. This is where it gets really interesting from a legal perspective.
The page content explains that the town gate of Bethlehem was the recognized court of elders, where transactions were witnessed. Ruth 4:7 describes this as the former custom in Israel concerning redemption and exchange of land.
And the sandal itself had specific legal meaning?
Multiple meanings, actually. The page content explains that handing over the sandal publicly surrendered the right to tread that land, since Joshua 1:3 states that every place where your foot treads has been given to you.
So the sandal was like a portable title deed?
Exactly. The page content notes it was a visible sign that all negotiating power changed hands. And here's something really clever. The Hebrew word for sandal, na'al, can also mean bolt or lock.
Wait, so there's wordplay happening here?
Yes. The page content explains that the exchange therefore locked the agreement, a built-in wordplay the elders would not miss. Just as a man would bind his feet with sandal thongs, the transfer made the property transfer legally binding.
And this is different from the punitive sandal removal in Deuteronomy 25?
Completely different. The page content explains that in Deuteronomy 25, the woman removed the man's sandal and spat in his face when he refused levirate duty. In Ruth 4, the Redeemer removes his own sandal voluntarily with no disgrace attached.
So Ruth and Boaz made it as easy as possible for the nearer kinsman to give up his rights?
Exactly. The page content notes it wasn't in their interest to shame him into taking her as his wife. They wanted a graceful transfer of redemption rights.
What's really striking is how all these customs work together to create this comprehensive legal and social system.
The page content shows how the Torah created a family structure that was integral to preserving tribal identity and ensuring people didn't lose their ancestral property or become permanently impoverished.
And there's archaeological evidence backing this up?
Yes. The page content mentions Nuzi tablets from the 15th century BC, recording property transfers by symbolic objects, often sandals, given in front of elders. There's also a 13th century BC ostracon from Lachish showing a sandal impression beside land grant lines.
So these weren't just biblical inventions, they were part of broader ancient Near Eastern legal customs.
Exactly. The page content notes these findings affirm the biblical custom rather than invent it. And there's even broader significance. The timing of Ruth's story during barley harvest connects to Passover and ultimately Pentecost.
How so?
The page content explains that barley harvest started in Nisan, coinciding with Passover, and culminated in Shavat, the festival celebrated 50 days after Passover. Ruth's story, as a love tale between a Jew and Gentile, foreshadows the unification of Jews and Gentiles through Christ.
And Shavat translates to Pentecost in Greek, when the Holy Spirit opened salvation to both Jews and Gentiles.
Exactly. The page content notes that the number 50 signifies freedom, echoing the year of Jubilee. So the timing of Ruth's return during barley harvest becomes a symbol of redemption and unity.
What's fascinating is how the page content shows that every detail serves a purpose, from the barley being the first grain harvested to its use as payment and symbol of God's provision.
And the page content connects this to broader biblical themes. Boaz as the Goel foreshadows Christ as our ultimate redeemer. By accepting the sandal, Boaz assumes Ruth's debt and lineage, just as Christ takes on humanity to secure our inheritance.
So when you step back from all these customs and laws, what emerges is this incredibly sophisticated system that protected the vulnerable while preserving family lines and property rights.
Exactly. The page content shows how gleaning laws provided dignity through work rather than just handouts, Kinsman Redeemer laws prevented permanent poverty, and symbolic gestures created legally binding agreements that entire communities could witness and understand.
And Ruth's story becomes this perfect case study of how all these systems work together in practice.
Right. From her initial gleaning under legal protection, to her symbolic petition for redemption, to the formal legal transfer at the city gate, every step follows established customs that balanced individual rights with community responsibility.
What strikes me is how these ancient customs reveal principles that are still relevant today. The importance of protecting the vulnerable, maintaining family stability, and creating transparent legal processes.
And the page content shows how these weren't just social customs, but were grounded in divine law, reflecting God's compassion for the marginalized and his design for human flourishing.
So the next time someone reads about Ruth uncovering Boaz's feet, they'll understand they're not reading a scandalous romance, but a sophisticated legal petition embedded in ancient customs that protected the powerless and preserved family lines.
Exactly. Every gesture, every gift, every symbolic action was part of a comprehensive system that modern readers can finally appreciate for its wisdom and complexity.
Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts. The next time you encounter something in ancient literature that seems strange or scandalous, remember Ruth's story. There's probably a whole world of cultural meaning waiting to be discovered beneath the surface.